Okay, so we're going to go through a short history of type and typographic design. Starting with this example from ancient Rome. The written language had come from Sumeria through the Phoenicians, Greece, and finally the Romans refined it into this alphabet, which we still use today. And in addition to using the alphabet, we also used this design. Like these letters were designed to be cut into stone for formal inscriptions. And the font that is most similar to this font is Times New Roman, which was commissioned by the New York Times, but it was based on this font, right? And you've probably seen that on computers. Microsoft, I think, has it as a resident file. So when it comes to the different techniques that people are using to create font design, often the technique or the technology will affect the design, right? So they're trying to finish these vertical cuts cleanly. So they do these wedge cuts on the end, right? And these then become serifs. So this is called a serif in terms of our modern design. And we basically retained the serif till fairly recently in type design, just because people like tradition, they like how it looks, but it's really just something that related from stone cutting resulted. So moving on from the Roman era, we look at the English language through the medieval period, and this is what you'll find, this type of text. Old English, as it's sometimes described, or variations of. And basically, you had a bunch of monks and learned people copying books, and they put a lot of artistry into the letters, and the letters were fairly beautiful, but also somewhat hard to read. So that's a very common problem you have to deal with in type design, is finding the balance between legibility and creativity, meaning that even though the type looks cool, you still want to be able to read it, right? So you'll have to find that balance yourself. Moving on from the medieval period, again, we're skipping hundreds of years, and this is the 1970s. So in the 1970s, they started to formalize serif fonts and really clean them up. They had a whole new schools of minimalist design coming out, and these are examples of modern type design, but they still have these remnants of that old Roman style. And if we look at this font now, this is one of the first sans serif fonts, if not, yeah. This is Helvetica, and it was designed in Switzerland. And at the time, it's crazy to say it was groundbreaking because you're pretty familiar with these fonts. They're the resident fonts on computers and devices a lot of the time, right? So sans serif fonts you're pretty used to by now, but it was sort of revolutionary for them to just do straight lines on the outside of the letters. And through this school design, the Swiss School of Design, you had a very minimalist look, and a lot of the time they were just creating designs with graphic elements and like simple text, right? So you can do this kind of thing for, I don't know, arty applications, stuff that's meant for print. Um, so when we're talking about basically you guys designing your name on a folder and giving some background to it, and what I'm looking for is a interesting use of font, creative font that sort of tells me something about you. So, and just from the typographic, so that's just typographic design means just the font, no illustration. So from the typographic point of view, things you can do to make it interesting or rotate it off the baseline like this, have a field of text with different colored letters. Um, you can use contrast, whereas you're making one letter a lot bigger than the others, and then the other ones become small. You can break letters apart to create graphic elements that sort of read as a design rather than a letter form, because you only see a part of the letter. And yeah, there's a bunch of different things you can do in terms of typographic design. Again, that's another example of medieval design in comparison to the examples you just saw. You see how it's a lot less clean and a lot less legible. So skipping forward throughout that era of design, we come to the contemporary era. So those examples I just showed you of that clean design, you could call that modernist. It was sort of a movement in the 19th century. Whereas if we talk about what's happening now, we're going to say contemporary. So this would be an example of contemporary font design where people are really breaking type apart. They're using script fonts, but in unusual ways. And a lot of this came through the development of Photoshop and skate design and grunge music, album cover design in the 1990s. Because they had the tech of Photoshop, they could start doing a bunch of weird things with type, which I'll show you how to do at some point if you take Photo 1112. But basically it allowed them to deconstruct type and really sort of blow apart all the rules, right? They had learned the rules and then they decided they wanted to change them. So in terms of communicating meaning through type design, this type of look usually relates to like high-end design or high-end products, very clean, tries to communicate luxury. This format is with the initials above a name kind of thing, and many of those companies use it, like Louis Vuitton, etc. This is the old sports format. Again, it's sort of a serif, but it's a block serif, right? You want to try something like that if you're into sports. You arch the text on top. You can always throw an established, whatever your birth date is, on either side of that design. These are moving into custom fonts, so a lot of the time companies will hire designers to create custom fonts. You can do a custom font for yourself as well, as long as it's nicely planned out. This is Craftsman, so of course the concept is relating to cuts, right? Or sort of looking like a bolt, I guess, both those two meanings there. If you're combining fonts, try not to use more than two. This is another custom font based on Disney's signature. So this is an interesting concept design in type. They're basically communicating the idea of speed through this long white line and then the dot, sort of like racing Ferrari. But they're not using anything other than type, which is, it's impressive. So yeah, that's about it. Briefly, I want to show you, you should have folders, pencils, and rulers in the room. And briefly, what you want to do, for example, if the folder is, let's just say, this green area, right? Then what I did is I inset by 1 inch on one side, 1 inch on the other side, and I just cut them in. You can use centimeters or whatever it is. If you measure in, then you have an area where you're going to put your text. And then you take this total number. So for me, it was 10, I think. And then you divide it by the letters of your name, right? This area. So that'll give you equal area for each letter. If you want to go with some of those off-kilter formats where you're going out of screen, etc., by all means, go nuts. But if you're just wanting to do a simple type in the middle, then try to center it basically, and just keep it like that. So yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Even if it's off center, I would like to see letters that are sort of uniform. So this is one of the ways of planning it, and then you can sort of be a little bit more free in the squares, right? But everything's going to be sort of looking balanced. So yeah, that's all it is. Good luck on the folders. Today you're just lining out. You're not trying to do outlines or fills. We're going to do that next day, and then we can also add illustrations at that point. So just try to focus on the aspect of type design, font design, and doing good lineouts and pencils today. Okay? Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next day.